Hilchis Macholas Asuris Peri Shiva Asa. So Behamsha that we're learning over here the dinim of Taruvis Heter Beiser Min Beminim Min B'Sheinim Minei. So over here we're learning also the Taruvis of something that was nivla in a keli, in a kedera. It was nivla in a kedera, a iser, and then you cooked in the kedera a heter. So the blia in the kedera goes out back into the food that you're cooking now, the dvar heter. So again, so it's a taruvis of iser beheter, and that the dinim again apply. Min b'mina, min b'sheinim mina. That's the halachos over here. Now, kedera shel cheres, perek shivasa, kedera shel cheres, shmizbashel bo b'sar nevela. If you have a kedera, the Rambam says kedera shel cheres. The cheres is only negeya because a cheres lepeil you can't kasher. So memela, so the hamshach is that you shouldn't buy such a kedera shel cheres that was used by a goy. But the Rambam says this din of halacha alav is lav davka kedera shel cheres. It's any kedera. Kedera shel cheres shmizbashel bo b'sar nevela. Ei b'sar shkotz meramosim. So this kedera was bileya the iser that was cooked in it, either the nevela or shkatzim or masim. So the din is lei yivashel bo b'sar shchuta beis hayem. And this is really on a menatera level. The Rabban will soon say you're not allowed to cook shchuta la'ilam, but on a menatera level, you should not cook b'sar shchuta beis hayem, because the b'sar shchuta will be bileya from the iser that was nivla in the defnei akeli. The defnei akeli was bileya the iser. And now, if you're going to cook over there b'sar shchuta, so they will be boleya. So the defnei akeli will be pelet, the iser that it was boleya, and that will be nivla into the b'sar shchuta. And the im bishelba, and if you did cook, so im bishelba min basar is a tafshalasa. Why? Because then it's min b'minay, and we assume that the defnei akeli, the thickness of the defnei akeli, in regards to what's inside the keli, is not shishim. There's no shishim kinegde of the defnei akeli. Whereas we're being mishayir keilu that the whole defnei akeli are filled with iser, that it was beleya. It's not really filled with iser, but that's how Chazal looked at it, as if it was filled with iser, and therefore, and what's in the keli is not shishim normally kinegde the defnei akeli. If lepel happened to be shishim, Moshe defnei akeli were very thin and things are very wide. So I'll call upon them. You could clearly see that they're shishim connected, so takaina chanami. So min b'mine would be batal b'shishim. But over here we assume that's why the pastors are devarim bishul b'min basar atav shalaser, because we assume that there's no shishim connected. However, bishul b'min acher. So no, the iser was basar shkatzim remasim, and then you went ahead and cooked something else in this pot. So it's tachmin b'sheini mine. What was nivla in the pot is basar, and what's now in the pot is something else. And the question is the basar going into the something else. So then it's b'nei santam. Then you have to see b'nei santam, because it's the same thing. Min b'minei is b'shishim, and min b'sheinim minei is b'nei santam. Now, v'liyoser teira, this iser that teira says you're not allowed to cook in it, and if you cook in it, it becomes aser. In the case of that it becomes aser if it's b'nei santam. V'liyoser teira ella k'deira b'siyema b'lvad. The iser teira would only be a k'deira b'siyema. Why? Because heil v'adayin. Since it was Bileya, the Kedera was Bileya, the Isser, so we say that this Isser is still an Isser which is not Pogum. When that Isser comes out of the walls and goes back into whatever's being cooked in the pot, so that's Mashbiach what's being cooked in the pot. And the Belia is still intact, there's nothing Pogum about it. And fakir, so it's mashbiach, what's being cooked now in the pot. That's when it's a basiyemo, in the same day. Masha'inkin, if it's the following day, so by the following day it's already nivgam. And since it's already nivgam, so memela, so it's the chanes and tam lubgam. And and tam lubgam doesn't answer. The tam of an and tam lubgam doesn't answer. Nochamal. Liyaser teira l'kedera basiyem bilvad, the kedera on that day. Hail v'adayin l'nivgam hashuman sheniv l'bigdera. Abram divri seifrim. Is leivashel b'leilam. Not only on that day you shouldn't cook, but you shouldn't use that at all. And kli cheres, you don't have an option of kashering it. So basically, a kli cheres that was used for something treif, you should never use that kli cheres for something kosher. Lefichach is ein leiken kli cheres yishonim and akim shemishtam sheben b'cham. You cannot buy old kli cheres from a goy which used it with something hot. King Deiris v'kairis leilam. Even if they were glazed with lead, since they're klicheres and they were mele, they absorbed, so they absorbed. And Seifrim, you're not allowed to cook with them even being sheni, even not when they're ben yema, and you can't kasher them. So mele, so don't buy them. There's no point in buying them. Even though Chazal told us not to cook with a pot that absorbed a dvar iser even on the second day. So that is a tafshul mutter. The tafshul is mutter. Now, what's called the second day is a ganze issue. What's it called the second day? The second day means the following day, as it went through the night, or the second day means 24 hours later. It's a machlek surashem. But I'll call upon the Rambam doesn't get involved. The Rambam says Kedera Basiyem, the Kedera of that day. So B'kitzur Nachamal, Midiraisa, if you cook with a pot Dvar Iser, and then you go ahead and cook with it on the same day, a Dvar Heter, so if the Dvar Iser puts in a tam into the Heter, Memele, if it's a Min B'minei, so then it's Iser because Min B'minei there's no Shishim connected. And again, that's on a Midrabanan Dika level. Because on Midiraisa Dika level, you don't need Shishim by Min B'minei. By Min B'minei is enough rave, and this for pashtas there's rave there is. So Memele, so Min B'minei you're not allowed to cook. And Min B'sheini Minei also is, since if it's a nascent tam, it's a problem. But that problem is only on a Midiraisa Dika level. The problem is only on the first day when it's a Ben Yema. Masha'en Kain Midrabanan, you're not allowed to cook in there at all, ever. And Lepel, but the Evid, if you did cook, so then it's mutter. But the Evid, it's mutter. Why? Because it's a nascent tam lebgam. Halacha Gimel. Halakeach klei tashmir sudam and akum. Miklei matchus uklei schuches. Is dvarim sheli nishtamish bam koliker, if the guy never used them, is matbilam b'mei mikvah, v'achar kach yeh mutarim lechel b'em v'lishtes. You have to be table them. Which we'll soon learn what's together of this tefillah. You have to be table them in a mei mikvah, and then you can use it, because they were never used, there's no problem. All you have to do is be table them. Udvarim shenishhtamish b'em ayidei tzena, if they were used, ayidei tzena, can cases, utzluchias, v'kitenes, and others, cups, jugs, whatever, pitchers, is madichon, so you wash them out, umadbilan, and then you table them, and vein mutaris, again, they're mutar. However, dvarim shenishtamshu b'maydicham, things that you use with something hot, and they absorbed, kegen yeres v'kumkumusim, pots, and different types of pots, umechamim, and things which you heat things up in is magilon, umadbilon, vein mutarim. You have to be magil. Magil literally means to purge the isser from the keli. We'll soon learn how you purge this isser. So you magilon, umadbilon, and then you table them, ve'imutarim, and then they're mutar. That's if they were used like yidei achamin, but they were used like yidei achamin with water. And there was fire, and there was also water in the pot, and there was something cooking in the water. Things which were used directly with fire, without water, not pots with water, but things that were used directly with fire. If you have, let's say, a spit, or you have a grill, which you use directly over the fire, so then is malabnum ba'ur, you have to heat it up in fire, until the outer surface of the item peels off, and then umatbilan, and then you table them, behimutar. It's nachama. If you buy a klitashmish from a goyis, if it's a new klitashmish, what you have to do is tefillah. If it's a klitashmish that he only used ayidei tzeinin, so you wash it out and then you table it. If you use it ayidei chamin, so then you make hagola, which we'll soon see what hagola is, and then you table it. And if it was mishtamish ayidei ur, so then you have to be, then you have to malabnum, you have to need libun ba'ur until tasik kliposam, and then you're tabled. Ketzad Magilon, how do you make Hagolah? In other words, you make Hagolah on a klimatches, which you use b'chamin, is nesen yere ktana l'tech yere gdela, umemalo lehamayim achi yatzufa laktana, until the smaller pot, which is in the larger pot, is submerged in the water, and then umarticha yafi yafi, then you heat up the water, and that causes the Hagolah, that purges the issa, which is b'techa hayera ktana. It was a large pot, so therefore you can't really put it in another pot because you don't have a large pot to put this large pot into. So Memela is makiv al svase batzik etit. You surround on top of the pot with either dough or tit. Umemali mayim, you fill up the pot with water. Achi etzufa mayim al svasa, until the water goes also onto the top of the walls of the pot. And as you want that the wall of the top of the pot, so you want that the top of the pot, the lip of the pot, should also be submerged in water. The water should be on top of that area as well. So if you don't have this tit or butzeik, so the water will heat up, but the top of the wall of the pot won't be covered in water. So over here, that's why through the butzeik and the tit, you're able to actually the water runs over on top of the svas of the pot, the tip of the pot, umartiach, and then you heat it. And this is what you're supposed to do in order to make hagola. Whereas you didn't do what you were supposed to do. You weren't martiach, you weren't midiach, you weren't malbin, you weren't matbul. Is mutter. Why? There was a dover shekol hashumin shebehem nesen tan lubgam ukmisha. So we learned earlier. So he's talking about if you used it, the pashas were using it after the first day. In other words, it's not a ben yema. So since it's not a ben yema, so even though you're using it b'chamen, but nevertheless, since it's not a ben yema, so it's nesen tan lubgam. Now the ma'aseh is the chura, you didn't wash it. So if you didn't wash it, he's saying even if you didn't wash it, actually he diach. So the chura, if you didn't wash it, there could be some residue of iser on the walls. So the chura, so the Rambam holds that the residue which is lying on the side of the pot is also, if it's not a ben yem, is nesen tam lubgam, which is bemis machlekes rishenim. Shulchan Aruch has brought down that the blia in the walls of the pot. So when it's not a ben yema, so then it's a nesen tam lubgam. But the part, the shamnunis, which is on the walls of the pot, which wasn't nivla b'techa pot, so even if it's not a ben yema, it could be a nesen tam l'shvach. But in Rambam is mavur not like that. In the Rambam is clear that kol hashuman shebehem, even the shuman, which is on the side of the pot, is also, since it's not a ben yema, it's nesen tam l'bgam. That's what's mavur here in Rambam. I mean, there's another point over here also to mention that the Rambam said before that he said you're not supposed to use a geder of a goy. Then he says lepel at the end of halacha beis v'mlokach ubishul behem miyem sheni v'hola tafshul muter. So when you so the Rambam is medayik that you lokach ubishul behem miyem sheni v'hola. What happens if you bought from a goy and you cooked on that day? So pashtus the tafshul is osir. The question is, do we neman? It says the Rambam is not naming on this klal that's brought down in Shulchan Aruch that the stam keilim of a goy are not ben yena, are not ben yema. Whereas Lalach is brought down that lepel, if you buy a keli from a goy and you used it, so b'diavad it's mutter. Why? Because b'emes it's a svek. First of all, it's a suffix. Maybe it's not a ben yema, and secondly, even if it is a ben yema, it could be that was bileh something which this is a nesen tam lebgam. So therefore, lepel you don't have to be. If you buy a keli from a goy, even though you don't know when's the last time you used it, nevertheless, if you shouldn't use it, you're not supposed to use it, even if it's not a ben yemi, you're supposed to kasher it. But lepel, if you used it, and even though you don't know for a fact that it's not a ben yema, it's also mutter whatever you cooked in it. Lashon Rambam at the end of halacha beis, the diuk is v'mlokach ubishul mehem yem sheni v'hola. You know that it's already yem sheni. That's what seems to be in that Rambam. Over here, the Rambam seems to be saying the kulish and nishtamish b'm actually irtiach actually diach is mutter, because we assume that it's not a. I'm saying over here, the Rambam is like naming on the pshitos without like asking. Rambam is not mentioning if it was talking about it was Eina ben Yema. In other words, we're assuming it's Eina ben Yema. It's like a shtickle in diuk haloshin and pshat. But I'll call upon in Rambam is clear that what's lying on the side of the Geder is also Nesen Tam Lebgam. Mashenk and the Raj was brought down Shulchan Aruch, and as he passed in Shulchan Aruch, that what's not Nivla in the walls of the Geder is still a Nesen Tam L'Shvach. Now, Tevilas zu, shematbilen klei asuda, hanilkochim no'akim, v'achar kach yutru lachilu shtia, is ein al inyan tumah v'tara. Normally we're used to that the inyan of Tevilah is to take away tumah. But over here, it's not an inyan of tumah v'tara. Ela medivri seifrim. It's a Rabbanon Dikadin, this tefillah of a clay suda that you bought from a guy is a Rabbanon Dikadin. That's the Rambam holds it's a Rabbanon Dikadin. Other Rishonim holds it's a Deraisa Dikadin. It's based on the Psukim. Hashenk and the Rambam holds that the Psukim are only asmachta. V'rem is law. It says, Kol dover ashiyavi ba'eish, taviru ba'eish v'toir. So that's what the Pasuk says. Over there, it's talking about the Klei Midyan, and we're talking about Kol dover ashiyavi ba'eish, taviru ba'eish v'toir. Pi Ashmuel lamdu, she'ena medaber el mitaroson midei giul Yaakov. When the Pasuk says that you have to be taviru ba'eish, Kol dover ashiyavi ba'eish, taviru ba'eish, is to take them out of giul Yaakov, and those utensils that we used for food, and it was treif. And Mimela, in order to be retired them from Giul Yaakov, you need to have Taviru Beish. Leimidi Tumah. We're talking, even though it says Taviru Beish v'Toher, so it sounds like we're talking about Psatuma to be retired. So you say, no, Chazal teach us that we're talking about Giul Yaakov. Why? What's the raya? What's the raya of Chazal? She'ein lecha Tumah Elai Yidei. There's no musig of Tumah, which is Elai Yidei. V'chol HaTfilah is always V'chol HaTmeim is B'Tfilah Eil M'Tumasa. Tumas mes, you need also Hazor v'Tfilah. Meisham Eish Klal. Elul Inyan Giul Yaakov. The Inyan of Eish, the reason why you Taviru be'Eish is in order to take away the Giul Yaakov, the fact that it absorbed Isser. It absorbed Isser because it was used be'Eish, and it absorbed Isser. You have to get rid of the Isser. Abba Vikiv and Shekasav V'Ter. Lepeil, the Pasuk says that Taviru be'Eish, and then it says V'Tor. So Chazal learned Amru Chachamim. That from this V'Tor we learn out Heisiv l'Tara Acha Aviras Beish. Besides the Aviras Beish, which the Aviras Beish is not a Matar, but it should also be V'Tor. Lahatire Migiul Yaakov. Lahatire, so you should also have a V'Tor. A normal level of Tara, which is the normal level of Tara, is a Tefillah b'Mikvah. So B'Kitzer, the Pasuk says Taviru Beish V'Tor. So we know that the Eish is not causing the Tara because Eish doesn't cause Tara. So what is the Eish here for? The Eish is for Giul Yaakov. But Lepel it says V'Tor. So we learn that from V'Tor that besides the Taviru Be'Eish, you should also do a union of Tara, which is the Tara is a Tefillah b'Mikvah, and that should be Lahatire Migiul Yaakov. So that's this Asmachta. Again, the Rambam holds that's only a Din D'Rabbanan. Other Rishonim hold that the Chi of Tevilas Keilim is a Chi of Deraisa. It's Negel, Sveikis and all kinds of dinner. If a cotton could be table, knows whether or not it's a din deraisa, it's a din derabban. Halachos of Tevilas b'Tevilas. This tefillah, which they were mechayev, was only a lekli matches. It has to be first of all a kli matches. That's what the parsha over there when it says is talking about as chazor as hakesev kli matches and shel suuda. We're talking about kelim, which is connected to a suda, not stam kelim. And also on nilkach menakim, which are bought from a goy. Nachamol has to be a klimatches, and it has to be a klimatches shel suda, and it has to be a klimatches shel suda, which was bought from a goy or acquired from a goy. Aval hashel menakim, if you borrow from the goy, or he gave it to you as a mashkin, klimatches. So madiach, a martiach, a malabin, vein et tzarich lahadbul. So you have to be madiach if it's nishtam shebetzein, a martiach if it was nishtam shebechamen, a malabin it was nishtam shayidei eish. So all these things you have to do in order to take away the Giul Yaakov. But on the other hand, there's no chi of tefillah. Tefillah is not pshat. You're not allowed to use a keli of a goy unless you are tevel it. Pshat is if the keli of the goy was the goy's, and now it's becoming yours, and it's a klei suda, you have to. So then you need tefillah. You need tefillah when it's a kli suda that's yours. V'chein mlokach kli eitz a kli avonim is also, since it's not a kli matches, it's a kli eitz or kli avonim, is madiach a martiach ve'ein tzarich lahapku. V'chein kli charosim, if it's a kli charos, is also ein tzarich lahapku. Aval ashuim ba'avor, but if they're glazed with lead, is harein kli matches u'tzrichen tefillah. So I'm going to get before we said shuim ba'avor, so that you can kasher it, because sof kol sof, since it's a klicheres, so it has an adin of klicheres that you can't kasher it. But on the other hand, since it's glazed with lead, so lead is the chametal, so therefore harenke klimatches, and therefore it's tefillah. Therefore they have enough tefillah. So because there's a chi of tefillah. Now there's machlekes rishonim if this chi of tefillah knows if you're going to be toivel it before you kasher it. The pashtus lashon Rambam is always over here that you kasher it and then you toivel it. So the pashtus, once you kasher it, So Tzudar Tzu, you also have Hesav Leitara, Acher, Lashon Rambam at the end of Halacha Hey, Hesav Leitara, Acher Avirasi Beish, Lahatir Miguli Akum. So, no, besides the Havirasi Beish, you also have to have Nachatara, Lahavir Miguli Akum. Masha'enkein, L'chure, if you were table it before you were magal it, so the pastors in Lashon Rambam, it sounds like that's not enough. We're saying there's machlekes and poskim, and Shulchan Aruch has brought down machlekes b'negei these two. If it's liikuva, that it has to be the tefillah after the hagol. Yeah, there's a mechudesh dekavni nezer b'negei the chiyuv of Tevilas Keilim. Normally, you buy a keli suda from a store, even though it's a new keli, so obviously you don't have to kasher, it's a new keli. But on the other end, since it's a klei suda, you have to be table it. The Avnei time is that a klei suda, when it's in a store, doesn't have a din of a klei suda. The guy, the person owns it, a guy made it, but it doesn't have a din of a klei suda. When does it become a klei suda? If a guy buys it in order for him to use it as a klei suda, so then it's called a klei suda. And even if it's new, the guy never used it, but since he bought it for his own personal use, in order it should be a klei suda, so it has a din of a klei suda. Masha'enken, if a guy has something just for commercial reasons, he has it to sell. He made it he manufactured it in order to sell, and it didn't really have a shem klei suda until the person buys it in order to use it. So the whole din of Tevilas Keilim doesn't apply. It's a davar mechudesh. So it comes out that all these dinim that you take, the story of the clay medium wasn't from stores. They were taking kalim that belonged to people. And there's a mitzvah of a kalim that belonged to people that were never used. It belonged to a person, and the fact that it belonged to a person, so there was a chiyuv tefillah. Masha'enkin, before it belonged to the person, so it didn't have a din of a klei suda. I mean, the Ma'aseh is there's another din that's brought down the poskim that a store can't be toivel the keli. In other words, until the person buys the keli for his own use, and he's kaver that he's going to use it for a klei suda, so only then could he be toivel the keli. That's another din. Over here, we're talking about that it doesn't have a din of a klei suda. It doesn't have a din of a klei suda until a guy bought it and used it as a klei suda, or even if he didn't use it, but he had it for personal use. But if a guy manufactures an item, and the purpose of the manufacturing the item is to sell it and not to use it, so then it doesn't yet have the shem klei suda, and the mela, there's no chiyuv tefillah when a yid buys it. That's the davar mechudesh. Yeah, that's number one. And there's also b'negea, there's another issue b'negea. We know the Alter Rebbe writes in the Mishtar Mechiras Chometz that he also sells the kelim. Some people will makbid not to sell the kelim because they're afraid if you're selling the kelim to the goy, and now when you buy it back from the goy, so it needs tefillah because you're buying kelim klei suda from a goy. And the Alter Rebbe obviously wasn't cheishish. Alter Rebbe sold the kelim, and there was never an issue of having to be table the kelim. So there's a Halachos of the Rebbe that the Shiur of Tevilas Keilim, you have to understand it's a Santa din. The din of Tevilas Keilim is mostly, it's not pshat, you're not allowed to use the keli until you were table. If you borrow it from the guy, so even though it's the guy's keli and you borrow it from him, still you could use it without being table. It's a din that it's a keli that was by a guy and now it's going over to a yid and it became the yid and it's a klei suda. So then you have to be table. So the Rebbe says that a klei suda doesn't only mean that it's a klei suda, it's a shem klei suda. It's a klei suda which is shaykhs to be used as a suda. In other words, l'chatchila shaykhs to be used for a suda. Masha'enkim sees the Mechiras Chometz was in such a matzav that there wasn't really b'mtzias that he should actually use it as a suda but pale. So Memela doesn't go into that gather of a klei suda which needs tefillah. I'll call upon him. Not so far from the Avnei Nezer. Avnei Nezer is saying it this way, that it wasn't designated as a klei suda until it becomes private. You know, the fact that it was used, knows that it was made in order to be able to be used as a klei suda, but since it was made for commercial uses, it's not really called a klei suda. The Rebbe is saying that the fact that the guy didn't really, there was no talk about it being used lepel for a suda, so that's why it's not called a klei suda of a goy. It's a klei suda, but it's not a klei suda of a goy. Memela, it's not matzach tefillah. It's not the same word, but there's a certain similarity. Halacha zayin. Halakeach sakum nakum. You buy a knife, and a knife is sometimes used ba'esh because lepel, he turns things over on the fire. If it's a large knife, even if it's a small knife, so it's used to turn things over on the fire. Is malabna ba'esh, so it needs libun. The sakum needs libun. The other option is mashchiza b'rechaim shelo. If you use it sharpener and you sharpen it on its sharpener, so it's also like you're rubbing off the outside edges of the knife, so that's also being kashering it. That's to use on any situation, even to use it not bechamen, even to use it b'tzeinen, because lepel, since the dukkha, the sakina, and if it has of iser on it, and it has, especially if it's sugi klept iser, so therefore it gets very much into the food which it's cutting. Mitzad also mitzad the dukkha, the sakina, it says. If it's a sakin which is a good knife that doesn't have any cracks in it, is dailoi, it's enough in noatze bekarka kosher eser pom, and that'll be enough for ve'echel b'tzein. That's for to eat with it, to use it to cut something cold. That's enough if noatze bekarka kosher eser pomim, and that takes out any shamnunis which is tzugiklet. However, v'hoyi b'pkimis, oy shoyse yofa b'verotze lechel b'chamen, lishchid bo. So no, to use it for tzeinin. So again, to use it for tzeinin. So if it's a sakin yofa, it's enough to be noatze b'karka kosher eser pa'amim, and that'll take off any shamnunis which is in it. Masha'enke, and then mainly you could cut with it tzeinin. Masha'enke, and if you want to use it for something hot, or on the other end, the sakin has pgimes, and even if you want to use it for tzeinin, or you want to shecht for it, and you're b'choishish for the day that holds that Beis Hashchita is cham, it's considered cham, so therefore malabna, so then you need libun, mashchiza kula, or you have to sharpen it completely. You sharpen the entire knife. You know, you shouldn't start sharpening only the part of the knife which you're going to use. You should mashchiza kula. Yeah. However, shachad bo kedim shitarenu, you shouldn't really you should either malabna, you said, or mashchiza. But what happens if you lapel, you shechted it, kedim shitarenu, is mediach mekei mashchita. So all you have to do is wipe off the mekei mashchita, and then kolaf, and if you peeled it off, is a reason meshubach, that's not better. Again, because there's the chash of if the Beis Hashchita is hot or not. So in Mela, it's a chash that you're supposed to be machmer, but b'diavad, if you did it already, so it's besed. So is nachamol. A knife needs, so it depends. To use it for tzeinin, so if it has pgimes, it needs a libun or lahashchiza on to sharpen it on its sharpener. That's if it has pgimes, or if you want to use if it has pgimes. If it doesn't have pgimes, so then the eitzah is to be noyetz eser pamim bekarka. That's only if you want to use it for tzein. If you want to use it for cham, or if you want to shecht with it, so then you should be malabmit or mashchiza. Lepel, if you weren't malabmit and you weren't mashchiza, and you went ahead and you shechted, so you could just be madicha, you just wash it off, the mekei mashchita, and vim kalef, and if you peeled off the mekei mashchita, and as you took off some of the mekei mashchita, so then is areza meshubach, that's preferable. Halacha ches, sakin sheshachet bo treifa, is leyishchit bo ad sheyadicha afilu b'tzein. You shouldn't use that same sakin to shecht a kosher, a regular behema, ad sheyadicha afilu b'tzein. You have to rinse off the oy, you have to rinse off the knife. Oy, mekanche bebloy, shel godem, or you wipe it off with pieces of cloth. So over here, basically, the Rambam is passing that we're not worrying that l'chure that the Beis Hashchita is riteach, is hot. Memela, therefore, you could just wash it off with seinen. So l'chure it's a shtickle steer. The Rambam before said that if you buy a sakum from a goy, so for seinen is enough noatze bekarka. But for shchita, you shouldn't be just noatze bekarka. You should go ahead and kasher it. This says malabna mashchiza kula. Why? Because we're being choishish for the tzad that Beis Hashchita is riteach. So in halacha zayin we were choishish for the tzad that Beis Hashchita is riteach. So over here is why aren't we choishish? So the shach says that the pshat is another. Even the tzad that Beis Hashchita is hot. So a sakin which was b'lei ayidei eish, and now it's going ahead and shechting. So in Mela, so the riticha of the Beis Habliya is enough to be bileya from what the sakin was bileya ayidei eish. So in other words, the sakin was bileya through the eish, and now it's going and shechting. So we're concerned that what it was bileya ayidei eish will go into the behema through the shchita. Mashenkin over here, it was Beleya Ayidei Shchita. The Shchita is not so high. So, and now again, you want it to be Maflit Ayidei Shchita. So that's not really such a chash. It's not so riteach that it should be Beleya Ayidei Shchita, and then what it was Beleya Ayidei Shchita, it'll be Maflit Ayidei Shchita. So Bechia Gavna, we're not cheshish. That's how the Shach explains. Halacha tes. V'yeshem dvorim acherim, osru eisen achacham, afal pi she'en li yisurim ika ben ateiros. So until now, the Rambam spoke about all the yisurim. He started off that there's chof ches mitzvahs, 4 mitzvahs asay, and 24 mitzvahs leis asay. So there was kama v'kama yisurim. And then we spoke about Hilchas Taruvis, and Benegea Giuliakum, Benegea the Bli in the Keilim. Now he's saying Dvarim, which Mechatchila, there's no Ikum and Atera. V'yesham Dvarim Acherim, Osreis Nechacham, V'aval Pi She'en Li Yisurim Ikum and Atera. Aber Gozru Aleim, Kedei Lehisrachok Min Akum, actually is Arvu Behem Yisrael, V'yavela Dechasnos. In order to prevent Yidden from mixing with Goyim, and Yavela Dechasnos, and Mamela they assert certain things. V'elohein. Osru Lishtei Simoyim. You're not allowed to drink with a Goy. We're talking about drinking wine. Osru Lishtei Simoyim. There's no kshash of yain nesach, but you're sitting and drinking wine with a goy is asur, and that isur is period. There's a isur to sit and drink with a goy. We'll soon see in a mesiba shalakum, and v'asru lechel piton a bishuleim, to eat their bread or bishuleim. V'afilu b'mokim she'ein lochush ligiuleim, even though there's no kshash of any isur, there's no kshash that it was a psambliya shel isur, but nevertheless you're not allowed to eat not their pas and not their bishul under any circumstances. Ketzat leishta odom b'mesiba shalakum. If there's a mesiba shalakum, you shouldn't drink there. V'aval pi shehu yayin mevushel she'ein neser. Oy she'yishoyse mikelev levadi. He's drinking from his own kelim, so there's no kshash yayin nesach. So you're not allowed to drink b'mesiba shalakum. So he brings over here from Aruch HaShulchan that he asked that in the Hilchos Avodah Zarah over there he says that you're not allowed to eat in a Mishnah Nesuyim of Akum and others. Not every Mesiba shall Akum, only special Mesibas. Says over there's a Isser even to eat in the Chasna of a Goy, if a Goy making a Chasna, a Mishnah, so you're not allowed to partake in a Simcha. Even if you eat kosher food, you're not allowed to partake in a Simcha of a Goy. Masha'inkin over here, we're talking about not eating, we're talking about drinking. So the Isser of drink, so eating is only in Taka in such a Mesiba, which is connected like a wedding. Such a type of Mesiba. But Stamazay Mesiba, you could eat. If it's kosher food, you're allowed to eat. Mashenkin to drink wine, that's Osir, even if it's not a Mesiba, a special Mesiba. That's what comes out. Yeah. Nachamal. Leish Ketzad. Leish the Odom Mesiba Shalakum. Va'afal Pishu Yain Mavushul Sheini Nesar, Ishaha Yeshes Mikela Levadi. If most of the people in the Mesiba are Yidden, so that is mutter. And that's the number one. And also, you're not allowed to drink their beer, which is no shash of any yayin nesach. There's the place where they sell this beer, the bar, or you're not allowed to drink their beer. If you bought the beer there, and then you took it home, v'shaso sham is mutter. If you're going to start drinking beer with them in their place where they drink beer, so you may end up eating with them, and eating with them could also be geirim chasnos and mamela. So therefore, this is already two gzeiros. One gzeir is you're not allowed to drink wine b'mesiba shalakum. You're not allowed to drink wine b'mesiba shalakum, and then you're not allowed to drink beer in the place where they sell the beer. In the place they sell the beer. In the place where they sell the beer, you're not listening to beer. Now that's a din of beer. However, you ain't tapuchim, apple juice, you ain't remaining pomegranate juice, if you ate them, is mutal ishteisim b'chol mokim. Why? There was never a gzeira on things that are any motzi. You ain't simukim, wine that's made out of raisins, is hareu kiyayin, has a din of yayin, or misnasech, and shaykh is yayin nesech on the wine. So it's obviously all the yisurim, which is connected to wine, apply to yayin simukim. Halacha yud beis. Aval pisha osru pasakum, is yesh mikei mishimikilim bedav. There's places where they're making pasakum, and the Gemara says that pasakum, the gzeira, wasn't really so nispashet. And Memela, the day after that, they were makel. There were certain things they were mevatel part of the gzeira, and they were makel part of the gzeira. And v'leichem pas hanachtim ha'akum, you buy pas from a baker, b'mokim she'ein shom nachtim Yisrael, and also basada. So according to the Rambam, it has to be two kulas. It has to be a place where there's no Yiddish baker, and also it's in the basada. It's not in the city. So maybe you have no place where to bake over there. Mashenkin, if it would be be'ir, even if there's ein shom nachtim Yisrael, so it also would be usher, according to the Rambam. The Shulchan Aruch is brought down that as long as ein shom nachtim Yisrael, a person lives in the city and over there's no nachtim Yisrael, so he can be makel to take pas nachtim, the pas of a pas palt. That's called pas palt. V'leichem pas nachtim or akum b'mokim she'ein shom nachtim Yisrael ubasod mipnei shushas adchak. Avol pas balabatim, which balabatim means something that he baked for himself for him to eat, is ein shom misha meirable lahakol sheikar agzerim shum chasnus. V'miechel pas balabatim is yavi listed that's l'memela from that suda could come out chasnus. Now, what's called hidlik ha'akum esatanur v'ofer beYisrael. Lapel, the guy put on the oven. He put the fire on the oven, but lapel, the baking was done by the yid. Of hakeret ish hidlik Yisrael v'ofer ha'akum. Oy shehidlik ha'akum v'ofer ha'akum. Abrubo Yisrael v'nira eish ma'at ekof shleish. He knows he did something with the fire. He parked a little bit with the fire. Is hailed in the shtativ b'meleches hapas. He had somewhat of a shtatvus in meleches hapas arezim muteres. He threw one piece of wood into the tanner. So maybe the tanner was going, and the guy lit the fire. The guy put in the pas, and l'chura the pas would have baked without his throwing in the eitz. It has to be clear that their bread is asur. And the male, it has to be a status of a yid. As long as there was somewhat of an status with a yid, it's mutter. Now, akum shebishul yayin, a cholov, a dvash, a prishin. There's a quince, knows a fruit which really doesn't need any cooking. All these items don't need any cooking. They could be eaten without being cooked. It says davar, the chol davar, hanechel k'meishu chai, anything that could be eaten raw, is a real mutar. Whereas the Isser of Bishul Akum is only to eat something which was cooked by a goy, and without the cooking, it wasn't edible. Again, basar of a dag toffel, a dag which wasn't salted. Dag which is salted can be eaten raw. Mashenkin dag toffel which wasn't salted, or a beitza v'yirokes. So here in Bishlan Ha'akum B'tchila Vatseif, v'lei nishtativ Yisrael imei b'bishulon is arelu Yisurim. Asurim mishum bishul yakum. So the Yisra of bishul yakum, the first thing it is has to be a dover she'ein nechel k'meishu chai. If it's a dover she'nechel k'meishu chai, no, if it could be eaten raw, you don't really need bishul. So on that, there's no Yisra of bishul yakum. The bishul yakum is only something that's ein nechel k'meishu chai. And them gufa, even if it's nechel ein nechel k'meishu chai, in order that there should be an Yisra of bishul yakum, it has to be a dover which is eil al shulchan malachim. It could be served as part of a suda. So that's the concern. The concern is that you're going to eat bishuli akum, so immediately you're going to have a suda with the goy. But shaken, if you're eating something that the goy cooked, which is never really part of a suda because it's eina eila ala shulchan, you don't serve it together with a suda. So on that din is also not the din of bishuli akum. That's halachat tezvav. Amed dvarim amurim that bishuli akum is also b'dover shu eila shulchan malachim lechel beis apas. Something which you'll put on top of a shulchan malachim in order to eat bread with it. Kigem basar, ubeitzim, v'dogim, ukeitzim. Avol davar she'eina eila al shulchan malachim lechel beis apas. Kigem turmusin, shesholko eisen akum, which is a type of vegetable, a type of bean, which is not eila al shulchan malachim. Is avol pi she'eina necholim chaim. You can't eat a turmus when it's raw. You have to cook it many times. Is nevertheless a reil mutarim b'chein kol keitzim. So no, something which normally wouldn't be served together with a suda, it's not eila al shulchan malachim. That doesn't go into the gather of the dvarim which are asurim misad bishul akum. Or she'ich k'agzeira dach mishum chasnus, which means sh'liyizam they're akum etzli b'suda. He shouldn't be invited. The issa b'shul akum is a person shouldn't be invited to a goy for a suda. And Mamela, if he is now that he eat b'shul akum, so obviously he can be invited for a suda. If no one will invite him for a suda to eat this, that's not part of a suda. So Mela doesn't go into the Gzeira. The Gzeira was with Chazal didn't want that people should have a suda with a goy. So Mela, you shouldn't eat something which a goy cooked, which could become part of a suda. Yeah. V'dogim ktanim shemolchon Yisrael liyakum. If it was already salted, is arei hein kimation is bashal miktas bishul. So therefore, it's considered already as if it was already partially cooked. And then solon akum acharkein, and if the guy roasted it afterwards, so it's already something which is nechel k'mei chai. In other words, it doesn't have to be roasted. So memela mutarim, then it's mutarim. And over here, the chiddush is that even though the guy did the whole thing, the guy first, he salted it. Now, for salting it, it doesn't become bishul yakum. So the matzav is not bishul yakum. And now the guy went ahead and roasted it. So he roasted something which doesn't need bishul. So memela, it's mutar. If the yid salted it, that's what he's saying. Dogim ktanim shemolchin Yisrael eyakum. So therefore, it's considered as if they were nizbashal, and therefore, if after that, solon akum acharkein is mutar. The chol shebishli Yisrael ma'ad bishule bein betchila bein besaf. There's something that there was no salting and cooking. It was just cooking. But the yid cooked it partially, either in the beginning or in the end. Mutter lefichach iman niach ha'akum basar igdei al gabe eish. The guy put the meat or the pot on top of the fire, and then b'hafach Yisrael b'basar, or the haggis b'gdei, he turned over the meat, or he turned the pot, he stirred the pot. Eish hiniach Yisrael, or the yid l'chatil put it on. And then the gomer akum is ariza mutter, because as long as the yid was mishtatif partially in the bishul process, that makes it mutter. Yeah. Now dag shemolchi akum, a dag which the guy salted, or a peiris sheishnon at sheichshirin lechachila, talking about peiris which are not royal lechel kshuchai, and he went ahead and smoked them. He put them under smoke, and that caused them to be royal achila. Is harei elu mutar. So they're mutar. That's not considered bishul akum, even though the guy caused something for it to be able to be edible. But nevertheless, that's not called bishul akum, because maliach ene keriteach b'gzeirezu and b'hamushin ene kemavushul. Even though certain things we say maliach harei keriteach, but nevertheless, legabe the hilchas bishul akum, the fact that the guy salted it doesn't make it like as if he cooked it. Now that is that the fact that the guy smoked it is not considered as if he cooked it. V'chein kloye shelakum, which are roasted kernels of wheat, is mutarim v'lei gazra aleim. She'ein adam mizamen chaveri ala kloye. So even though the guy roasted the kernels, but nevertheless, that's not considered bishulakum. Halacha yudches, poilin, vafunim, vadashin, which is beans, vafunim is peas, vadashim are lentils, ukiyetzaven, sheshel kinesim akum, which the goyim cook, umecher nesom, is asurin. First of all, they're also mishum bishuli akum, the mokim she'elun al shulchan mulachim mishum parperes, a place where they're used, they're oil al shulchan mulachim, they're used together with the they're used as parperes hapas, they're used together with the bread. So memela, so they say isra bishul akum, even if they're 100% kosher, there's a shaila bishul akum. And then there's another shaila mishum giyuli akum b'chol makom. It's a shaila that maybe they're treif. Why? Because shemi vashla isum abasar. Maybe they will cook mamish together with meat, treifa meat. A bigdei shebishla ba'abasar. So memela, so you can't eat these things from a goy because we're worried. Sometimes we're worried for bishul akum, b'makom she'el al shulchan malachim, and every place we're worried about giyuli akum. V'chein asuvginin, suvginin are donuts, which dough and that you cook in oil. Shekel neisen shekel neisen ha'akum b'shemen, that they cook it, they fry it on oil, is also asurin af mishum giyuli akum, because we're not sure what kind of pot it's being cooked in, and memele it could be giyuli akum. Halacha yutes akum shebishel v'lein bashel niskavel lebishel is a reza mutter. There's a nudin that bishel akum is only if the guy intended on cooking, but Mashiach, if he did an act which had no intent of cooking and he ended up inadvertently cooking, so then is a reza mutter. Ketzat akum shehitzis ba'agam ba'agam kedei lahaver achotzer. So you have a swamp, and it has an overgrowth of things, and he wants to get rid of it. So he goes ahead and burns. He burns the overgrowth of weeds or whatever that's growing there. And lepeo, in that overgrowth, there were also grasshoppers, kosher grasshoppers. In this bashlu b'chagavim lepeo, those grasshoppers were cooked. So the din is harei mutarim, even though those grasshoppers are even though they were cooked through a goy. The guy had no intention of cooking them. In those places where these grasshoppers could be used as a parperes apas. So in Mela they fit that they could be bishul akum because they're elal shulchan malachim. But nevertheless, since he didn't have an intent to cook them, he just cooked them like kila by accident. He was trying to get rid of the grass in the middle of the valley. He cooked it, so that's not considered bishul yakum. V'cheinem charach hareish lahavir haseir. He was scorching the head, singeing the head in order to take off the hair of the head of the animal. And the vile, so through this fire, he also cooked some parts, mutter lechel minaduldulim, and those pieces of meat that was sticking out of the head. So mela, they were roasted together while he was singeing the head in order to take off the hair. So pieces of meat got roasted, little pieces of meat that was sticking out, or meresha aznayim, or the edges of the ears. Shenitzlu b'shas chricha. So notice those parts that were very small. So in mela, they were able to be also. They were roasted while he was doing this charicha, he was doing this singeing of the hair. So, but he did it, he had no intent for that. So therefore, it doesn't go into together, bishul yakum. Tmorim sheshol kois nakum. You have dates which the goyim cooked. So they didn't need this bishul, they were nechel k'meishu chai, as el mutar. And the bishul causes them to become edible, is arelu asurim. Is hoyu beinim is also arelu asurim. In other words, they're not mamish 100% edible. So memela they're also asurim. Koli shaladashim shaloshe. In other words, you have roasted lentils, and then you went ahead and you kneaded them bein b'mayim bein b'chemes. You mixed them out together. You made them to a flour and you mixed it up with water or chemes. That is also because he said before that adashim is considered elal shulchan malachim, and there's a din of bishalakum. Avol koli shulchit museirim shalosh nesim b'mayim is a mutter, and that's what he said before that's not elal shulchan malachim because he ain't other mazmin on kloyes and memela, so therefore her is a mutter. Shemen shalakum is mutter. The oil of a goy is mutter on all levels. Umisha oyser, there was a time that shemesh shalakum was geyser, just like they were geyser on pitom and on bishalakum, they were also geyser on shemen akum. And then they were matter the shemen akum. There was a special heter, Rabbi was matter shemesh shalakum. So therefore the Rambam is saying shemesh shalakum is mutter. There's no issur of shemesh shalakum. Well, shemen means shemen zayis. Shemen shalakum mutter. Umisha oisroi hareza oimed beched godel mipnei shemamre al pi bezdin. They were matter. The Gemara says clearly that they were matter shemen. Vafilu nizbashel hashemen. So als din shemen akum is 100% mutter. Now, what about if it is afilu nizbashel hashemen? So l'churi you may be worried about giuli akum is also a mutter. Ve'inin neser leimi b'shum b'shuli akum. Why mipnei shenechel k'meishu chai? So there's no problem with the shemen, the fact that it was cooked by a guy. And also, mipnei giuli akum mipnei shabbosar pegim es hashemen masriche. What's the chash that maybe Psar Nevela was nivla into the Defni Agdera, and now it was niflat into the Shemen. But that basar, which was niflat into the Shemen, is a Nesen Tam Lebgam, not a Nesen Tam Lishvach. Memela, there's no problem. There's no problem of Giuli Akum. V'chein Dvash Akum, Shem Nizbashel, V'osim Imenu Minim Sika. So if you have like some type of a sweets that were made out of honey of a goy, is also mutter mitam zeh, because even though they were cooked, and they were cooked maybe in a pot which had not kosher, it had a blia of a dvar yisur, but since it's a nesen tam lebgam, because whatever the blia was when it goes into the dvash, it's only poigim. So memela there's no problem of yuliakum. Halachos of Tevilas kuspan shalakum shehuch muchamen, because you have the pselis of tmorim, which was heated up. You heated it up in hot water. Ben b'yerek deila, ben b'yerek tan is mutter. Mipnei shenesen tan lebgamu. So obviously there's no shaila of bishalakum because nechel k'meishu chai and it's ein elal shulchan malachim. But on the other hand, the shaila is what about giuliakum? Maybe it was bileya something from dvar yisur. So the answer is whatever was bileya is nesen tan lebgam. It doesn't add anything to the kuspa. The chein kvoshim. If you have pickled food that you don't normally put vinegar or wine, or pickled olives, or pickled grasshoppers, Now, sheboin min ha'etzer, which you're taking from the storehouse, from the storage room, because you're taking it from where you store it, so that's mutarim. Aval knows why, because when they don't put wine in the place where they store it, because if the wine is going to be there, after you put the wine there, it can't stand there for an extended period of time. So Mela, when you're storing it, so they don't want it to spoil. They want it to stand there for a long time, so they don't put wine. When they bring it to the place where they're selling it, so over there, they're keeping it for a short period of time. So over there, they put wine in it to add, it adds to it, to its mitzias. So therefore, v'chagovim hakvushim shebayim ha'etz is mutarim. Aval chagovim ukvoshim shemizalfen aleim yain. The situation where when they sell the chagovim or the kvoshim over there, they would sprinkle wine on it in order to make it better. That's already when they're selling it. It's not boing min ha'etzer, so that's asurim. The chenim hoyim mizalfen aleim chaymetz, v'afilu chaymetz shecher is also asurim, even if they don't sprinkle wine. The sprinkling vinegar, and even vinegar that comes from beer. So the churabishleim vinegar that comes from wine is a problem. Masha'inkin vinegar that comes from beer, what the problem is? That we're saying no. That if you have kvoshim or chagovim, which you have mezalfman aleim yayin, basically it means that you have it. The person is selling it, and since he's selling it, so it's not boim and oitzer. So over there, the place where he's selling it, and he has a little jar or a little barrel of this item that he's selling for that day, so then he will sprinkle on it wine or sprinkle on it vinegar. And even if he sprinkles on it vinegar from beer, it would also be a problem. Why is vinegar from beer a problem? Why could there be a problem with the chemetz, the vinegar of the beer? Because lepel, in the vinegar of beer, they would put in a little bit of wine. They would put in dregs of wine. Shmari they would put the dregs of wine in it. Because they wouldn't put the shmari yayin, the dregs of yayin, they wouldn't put into the the chemetz of shecher when it's in the oitzer, because then it might get spoiled. So again, they don't put wine into things which are going to have to last for a while. They put the wine into things which they're going to sell soon. So in Mela, when it's nilkach min ha'etzer sai, when this kvoshim and the kvoshim and the chagovim, which are nilkach min ha'etzer, you're not worried that there's wine there. Mashenkin, if you're taking it from a place where he's selling it, and over there's mizalfen aleim yain, you're not allowed to take these kvoshim because you're afraid mizalfen aleim yain. And even if the mizalfen aleim chemet shecher, because there's a concern that in the chemet shecher there's yain, the shmari yain. What about chemet shecher itself? So chemet shecher itself, if the chemet shecher is being nilkach from the oitzer, it's mutter. Mashenkin, if the chemet shecher is not being nilkach min oitzer, there's always a chash. Maybe they will mizalef yain. Halacha chavav hamurius. Murius is fish brine. The mokim shedarkan losses letecha yain aser. However, v'mhoya hayayin yokem and hamurius, it was more expensive, is mutter, because then when achoshes they put in wine. Because then made in b'chol davar shecheshen leishem me'irva be'akim davar aser. This is the rule. The rule is she'ein adam ma'arev davar hayoker bezul. And where choshes did they mix wine into the brine? So it depends. If wine is less expensive than the brine, so then there's a svara that they mix the wine into the brine, because in order to make it, they needed the volume, and they'd rather have this volume made up of wine, which is less expensive. However, if wine is more expensive, so why should they put wine into the brine? He'd rather put something less expensive into something that's more expensive, in order to be able to gain something, to have a profit from it. The profit is that he has the volume without the expense. Halacha chav zayin. Cotton she'achal echad m'macholas asuris, she'asam malacha b'Shabbos, ein bezen mitzuvin olav lafrishe. L'fisha ein ben das. So they don't have to stop him not from eating a meichel asur and not from doing a malacha b'Shabbos. V'amedvar mamurim b'shasam yatzmi. Aval lachile b'yodayim asur. Is lachile b'yodayim is asur. And the mice is that Malterev brings to Shulchan Aruch, the lachil v'asar is the issa deraisa, because we learn out lesechlum, lesachilum, we darshan you're not allowed to be meichel a cotton, a issa b'yadayim. It's a issa deraisa to be meichel a cotton, a issa deraisa. The aval lachil b'yadayim also. Vafilu dvarim sheisur midivri seifim is also even midrabanan, things that are also midrabanan. So obviously midrabanan, you're not allowed to be Michael Hakot. V'chein, osur lahargilei bechil Shabbos umeid. You're not allowed to be margalim bechil Shabbos umeid. Vafilu b'dvarim shemishum shvus. So there's two dinim. You're not allowed to be Michael b'yadayim. You're not allowed to be margal bechil Shabbos umeid. Vafilu b'dvarim shemishum shvus. So the Rambam brings over here that this Meshav Dover, which is the Netziv, he holds from the Rambam, the Lashon Rambam, also lahargile b'chilu Shabbos means you're not allowed to be margal him b'chilu Shabbos. But on the other hand, if you're going to do bakroi ba'alma, notice once in a while that you ask him to do something, a dvar iser, that wouldn't be a problem. That wouldn't go into the gather of lahargile b'chilu Shabbos. That's how he's medayik from the Lashon lahargile. So lahargile, he's teaching, it means to get him accustomed to it, to have him, you should be rogel b'zeh. That's how he's teaching the word lahargile. The Ma'aseh is the Alter Rebbe brings in Shulchan Aruch that the Rashba holds that l'tzerech mitzvah muter litn lekotten bakroi lases ish shvus, and he says that the Rambam holds not like that. He knows the Rashba. He brings the Rashba that bakroi is muter, not like the Rambam. The Seisna the Verte, the Alter Rebbe is learning that the Rambam holds that bakroi is also osir. Now, according to the Rashba, it's taka only osir on a regular basis. Masha'ik and bakroi would be muter, mitzvah. But from the Rambam, they say the way the Alter Rebbe brings the Rashba, benigud lahar Rambam is muchach, that the Alter Rebbe learns that according to the Rambam, it's always usher, even bakroi, which is al derech l'achil b'yadayim, is behemsha. L'achil b'yadayim is usher, and usher lahargile b'chilu Shabbos. What does lahargile mean? Lahargile sounds like he should not only do it bakroi, beifon rogel. So he says tak over here. The Rambam Aruch says that the taich of lahargile doesn't mean there's a musik called lahargile. There's a Lashon Gemara shlei lahargilis ahespet. There's lahargile doesn't mean to get something used to. In other words, to get someone, in order to do something in order to get someone to do something. In other words, sometimes lahargil you margil the behema in order to get a mum. In other words, lahargile means you even as is fakert. It's not aggressor. Lahargil b'chil Shabbos is not you're being Michael in the Chil Shabbos b'yadayim. In other words, you're doing something in order to get him to be Michal Shabbos, and that's also osir, and that's even osir bakroi. So fakert, this says the Meshav Dover was learning that lahargili is like a svara lekula, that lahargili b'chilu Shabbos is osir, but not lahargili is muter. Masha'inkin, the way he's being medayik, the Rambam Aruch is being medayik from the Alter Rebbe, that the bakroi ba'alma is also osir. So what's tash lahargili? Fakert. Lahargili means even not to mamish make him do it, but to get him to do it, to do something which will cause him to do it. That's also osir. Even at the Rabbanon, you're not allowed to be margil him, in other words, get him to do something, in other words, do something in a way that will get him to do something which will be a Chil Shabbos. Now that's B'negei Bezdin. Bezdin is ein Mitzuvan Lafrisha. That he says, the Rambam says in Halachos of Tevilas, Aval Pisha ein Bezdin Mitzuvan Lafrisha Kotten, of a mitzvah la'aviv liger bei u'lafrisha k'dei lechanche b'gdusha. Shenemar chanech l'nar al pidarkes. That's a chiyuv chinuch hanakot. That's a chiyuv chinuch of the father. Halachos of Tevilas. Osru chacham. Here the Rambam is saying all things which, as the Rambam started off in Pei Halachos as well, that there are certain things, Halachos Tevilas, that yesh dvarim acherim that are osir only midrabanan, that they don't have a yesod min ateidah. These are the inyanim which are osir midrabanan legabi macholos. Osir chachamim macholos umashkin shenafesh reiv bnei adam keimem. Things that people find very, very repulsive. So something that people find regular people find repulsive, you're not allowed to do. Kigoin macholos umashkin shenisarav bem ki. Oitzeya, someone there was ki is something a person vomits, and oitzeya. So if that was mixed into the food, so for a person to eat food that has in it mixture of ki oitzeya, that's something which is repulsive. Or velechas rucha, which is a pus, uki eitzeber. V'chein osru chachamim lechel v'lishtis b'kelim hatzoyim, to use utensils which are very not clean. Shenafshi shalod misinanus bem. Kigain klei beis hakisei, or klei schucha shel saporim, which is the saporim are people that are makis dam. Shegerin behemes hadam, we take the blood out with it. So you're using a keli, which you're taking out the blood, and you're using it to eat, or you're using it to drink, and the keli which with the blood goes to, that's a dover, which is a dover mos. It's a dover mos, which reiv b'nei adam keyamehem. They find it very, very repulsive. That's to use a keli, which is either to eat food, which is mixed in with things that cause it to be very, 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 very something that people find not pleasant, very unpleasant, or to use utensils, which again is very, very not very dirty. To eat with hands that are very filthy, or to eat on filthy kelim. Shekol dvarim elu bichlal al tishakzus nafshes eichel. Va'eichel macholes elu is makanesa makasmar is pasha yisud rabban. Halacha lamed aleph. V'chein asul la'odam sheyashes nekov of klal ben gedelim ben ktalim, to hold himself back from relieving himself. V'chol hamashin nekov his areza bichlal mishaketz nafshe. That's first of all the mere fact that he's holding himself back that goes into the gather of mishaketz nafshe and yeser al chaloim rabin shiyavi alatzme v'yischai benafshe. Besides the fact that through holding himself back from relieving himself, he will bring on himself sicknesses, and Memele, he'll be responsible towards the Eibishter, that he brought on himself sicknesses by his own. The person is supposed to watch himself. A person should have designated times. In other places in Hilchos Deis it says, should be in the morning and at night. He shouldn't have to distance himself. In other words, if he doesn't have, in the morning, people aren't around, so he could go, because people didn't have a designated Besakisi, so they would have to go out in the field. But he wouldn't have to go that far, because people weren't around. Masha'enkin, if he'll be during the day, so then he'll have to be Misrachik, B'fnei Bnei Adam, in order to distance himself, in order to be able to relieve himself. And also, well, he shakas nafshi, so he won't know if he's going to have to go to a distance place, so until he gets there, he'll have to hold himself back. So memelish they yisrachi b'fnei adam, and also liyishaketz nafshe. V'chol hanizu b'dvarim elu, and all these things which says litzishakzu es nafshe seichem is maybe kedusha utari yisera lenafshe, that causes himself kedusha utara umemarik nafshe, and that causes a special nikoyen and a tzichzuch, not those vices, some extra cleanliness. Memarik nafshe is memarik is nefesh l'shem HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shnemev is kadishtem v'yisim kadeshim ki kadish oni. Brich Rachmona de Sayon. So this is the Siyam of Hilchos Machalas Asuris.